know that the plenary session ran over a little bit, so it could be that some people are going to join us and are still drinking coffee. So I'm sure people on the door will allow us in. Okay, so hello. My name's Justine Coulson. I'm the representative for UNFPA here in China, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of our panelists and also all of our participants today, and very happy on behalf of UNFPA to be co-hosting this session with the United Nations Statistical Division on the future of census. So as you heard in the plenary today, as you heard the Secretary General talk about, data is essential for sustainable development. And we know that census, in terms of helping countries and governments have access to these very rich data sets of disaggregated data, census is critical in that. And what I personally found fascinating about census, even though I am not a demographer, is the fact that we have had censuses for hundreds of years in many countries. And it's a constantly evolving methodology. It's a constantly evolving way of bringing these huge data sets together in a society. And so one of the reasons why we're meeting today to talk about the future of the census is because we have a whole range of emerging questions across a number of countries about the future of census, about the cost effectiveness of census, about how can we really harness new technologies in the census process. Do we still need traditional censuses where someone comes and knocks on your door and fills out the survey? In many countries, we no longer do. And how do we really ensure the accuracy of data in a census? And how do we ensure that we can really have a census that leaves no one behind? You know that saying that if everyone is going to count, then we have to count everyone. So we've brought together a fascinating range of speakers today with different country levels experience to really share their experiences of census in their own countries and from their particular perspective to help us reflect a little bit on where we are heading with census as we look forward to the 2030 round of census. And we're going to try and keep our speakers to time so that then we have plenty of time for Q&A, because I know that many of you in the room will have expertise in census and will want to ask questions and share comments. So, without further ado, this is the point where I have to put my reading glasses on, otherwise it doesn't work, excuse me. It's the challenges of aging. Thinking about leaving no one behind. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go to our first speaker. We're very pleased to have with us Francesca Grum. Francesca is the Assistant Director at the Demographic and Social Statistics Department of the UN Statistics Division. The floor is yours, Francesca.
Thank you so much, Justine, and good morning and welcome to everyone. I'm indeed Francesca Grum. I'm Assistant Director at the UN Statistics Division in New York. So today, my speech, sorry, I need to go back. A little bit, apologies for that. Yes, I'll focus on some of the latest trends in terms of innovation and modernization around the world that countries have embarked in. And towards the end of the presentation, I will also point out how these latest trends and innovations are guiding the work at the global level. So let me first start by saying a few words on who we are and how we are involved in the implementation of the World Programme on Population Housing Censuses. This is the mandate that the UN Statistics Division has been given many, many years ago. So we have been in the business of assisting countries in their efforts to implement population housing censuses for more than 6 decades. So that's a long time. We have a lot of experience, not me personally, but I know many of my colleagues are watching online. Greetings. So in our role as the Secretariat of the World Programme on Population Housing Censuses, we have been very busy in developing the normative work, so all the statistical international standards, the principles and recommendations have been produced in-house by the UN Statistics Division with many partners, of course, UNFPA, the regional commissions, and many other stakeholders, both at the national and international level. Once we establish this normative work, so we agree on what are the principles and recommendations behind the undertaking of population housing censuses, we make sure that countries have the capacity to adopt these standards and implement these methodologies. We have also the task of continuously talking to countries, monitoring where they stand with their census undertaking to better understand how to customize and target our assistance to countries, so to better understand their challenges and potential solutions that would help them in their census undertaking. And I have a slide on the next page showing the results of this working together with countries during the COVID pandemic and what we learned. And finally, we also have a direct link with the UN Statistical Commission. That's our board of directors. It's where the global community comes together once per year. And in that context, we are also mandated to report on the implementation of the World Program on population and housing censuses on a regular basis. So more or less every year, we report back to the global statistical community. But let me go on one of the key points that I want to talk about today. And again, I'm not entering into the overview of innovations yet, but I think it's important to set the stage for our discussion today. This slide is based on a survey that we conducted both in 2020 and as of 2022. So we took a snapshot of where countries stand in terms of census undertaking just before the COVID pandemic hit, and most recently at the end of 2022. So what you have in front of you in blue is the distribution of countries by year of census undertaking pre-COVID. So you can notice the usual peaks around the years ending in 0 and 01. That's a typical for each decade or round of censuses. And in red, you see what actually happened. So what we learned is that there was a huge push, a huge delay in census undertaking due to the COVID pandemic. And that has huge repercussions and implications at the country level, but also at the global level, because, for example, UNSD and our partners, we were ready to wrap up the current census round that will end in 2024. And in fact, we are not in that position because we are still very busy assisting countries in undertaking their census, or even many are just in the planning phase. As you can see, as of 2023, there are still 41 countries that are planning to conduct their censuses. So, but let me go back to innovations and modernizations and what we have learned over the years. The key point here is that countries are making more and more use of technologies in each steps of the census undertaking. So we are talking about the mapping, we are talking about data collection, we are talking about using technologies for the management and the monitoring of field operations, and of course we are talking about the use of latest technologies for dissemination of results and communication. This is something that is not new. We have been observing this trend for a few decades now. You probably are the experts in census undertaking, so you remember that we started in the 1990s with the scanning technology to digitize paper questionnaires. Moving on the use of some solutions for data disseminations and for mapping, going towards the use of technology for data collection, and then moving towards the marriage between geospatial information and census operations, and also the production of grid-based census outputs as of today. So why there is this embracing of technologies in all the steps of the census undertaking? For many reasons, in particular for improving census quality, also for improving the timeliness of the census results, for improving dissemination, and I believe also for controlling some of the costs, huge costs behind this census enumeration. Allow me to zoom in a little bit on some of these points in terms, and leaving you with some statistics. After all, I represent the international statistical community right now. So from the global perspective, we see an improvement or an increase in the use of electronic data collection, so using technology for data collection, and a steady, regular switch from paper-based data collection to CAPI solution, so the use of tablets or smartphones or CASI, I also call it CAWI solution, where you have a self-enumeration on a web solution. In terms of the use of GIS for mapping and dissemination, so on your left side, we have a latest assessment as of 2019, so it's not very recent actually, where countries indicated that most of them, I believe 85 or 86%, are actually capturing GIS coordinates at the level of the enumeration area. And what is interesting is also to note that 75 or so%, so a significant number of countries, are able to capture the geographic coordinates at the level of building and housing units. On the right side, you would expect that there is more use of this georeferenced information in terms of data dissemination. Unfortunately, but again, the latest assessment was done in 2019, so we are in the process of having a new global survey, and I expect a higher percentage, but as of 2019, when we look at grid-based census outputs, there were only around 25% of countries using or promoting those solutions. One last point on data innovation is, as you know, as Justin pointed out, there is this push and this call at the country level to move towards better use of administrative records to produce census-like results. You can see again in the chart that there is this switch in the census methodology. The traditional census and full enumeration of household has been less adopted when we compare the 2020 round, that's the green bar, with the 2010 round, so the previous decade of censuses, that's represented in blue. On the other hand, we see that the combined census is picking up. So in just a 10-year span, time lag, we see that that's a steady trend that we are expecting to continue in the future. This is also based, of course, on what countries tell us. They are actually contacted us to get assistance on how to make better use of administrative records. In conclusion, I wanted to also share with you that all these lessons learned and this continuous communication that we are having together with stakeholders, together with our partners, with the member states, is really guiding the priorities at the global level and what we are promoting as we are embarking in the revision of the United Nations principles and recommendations for population housing censuses. We are just at the beginning of the process, and we are expected to bring the revised set of recommendations to the UN Statistical Commission in 2025. So we are a little bit in the rush, but we have established a group of experts, that's how we do it, composed of national statistical experts and also experts from the international statistical community. We are planning to revise many of the aspects of the old recommendations, but in particular, I wanted to point out the following. We will definitely take a deep look and try to provide a better guidance on how to move gradually towards register-based approaches, as I just mentioned. We will also invest and see how we can better formulate recommendations on how to integrate the geospatial information with census data, of course also for improved data analysis, and many other aspects, including incorporating what we learned from the crisis, the current crisis, and the COVID-19 crisis and the impact that that had on the census undertaking, and making sure that we agree on some sort of guidance on emergency preparedness, as well as we want to focus more on how to move also gradually towards online questionnaires and modes of data collection that will still be mixed modes, because we know that we cannot switch entirely into an online solution, but trying to promote that as much as possible. There is also a need or a call from countries to revisit the definition of population, particularly as we say that we are moving towards the use of administrative records. So what does it mean, a population? Is it the registered population? Is it the resident population? So all of that is up for discussion by this group of experts that will work for the next 2 years. And finally, we are also looking at the big data and the potential, in particular, of mobile phone data or mobile positioning data as additional data points, additional source of information, or at least as a new data point for validating the quality of the census data that will be collected in a traditional way or in a mixed mode approach. I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Francesca. I know some of you may have questions or comments, I think particularly on some of these recommendations that are coming out for 2030 census rounds. So do hold on to those, don't forget them, because we'll be having a Q&A session at the end. But I think, thanks Francesca, just for giving us that overview of that global status of where we are with census, both in terms of incorporation of new technologies, how far countries have gone in terms of moving away from traditional census, and also, as you saw, the huge impact that COVID-19 had on census. Now we are going to move to a country where, despite COVID-19, they were actually able to do a phenomenal job in terms of rolling out a hugely successful census. And I'm very pleased to invite Director General Wang Pingping to the stage. DG Wang is from the Department of Population and Employment Statistics from the China National Bureau of Statistics. Please, DG Wang, the floor is yours.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to Hangzhou, China. My hometown is not quite far from here. And I was very happy with my university life in this city. So I wish all of you, my friends, can enjoy your days in Hangzhou. Now let's back to the population census. Let me share with the innovation practice of China's 2020 population census, and with some perspective for the next round of census. Since the, can you use this one? No. Big grant. Good. That's good. Since the 1953, there's 7 round population census, and the recent one is the 2020 census. We call this the 7th National Population Census. The difference time for the census is 0 o'clock at the November 1st, 2020. The main contents of the census include the demographic information, employment status, and the status of the elderly and housing conditions. Compared with the previous 6 census, the innovation of the and the improvement was achieved through the application of information technologies. The 2020 census in our countries is so-called as electronic census, for it full adopted the electronic data collection and the whole process of the informatizations. Here, backward. Here is the workflow of the China's 2020 population census. This innovation applies to all aspects of the census workflow, as shown on this slide. Among many stages, the mapping, census enumeration, data closing, checking, and the data processing and aggregations, which was marked in the red dot lines, embodied the most innovative means. Mapping and the enumeration area demarcations are important stages in the census. In the past census, maps were mainly manually drawn. And in 2020 census, we developed a digital census area demarcation and mapping systems. Use satellite remote census images, mainly is from the map world for the demarcations. For the first time, the staffs use the mobile device to conduct the demarcation of the census area and the digital mapping of building in the field. And finally, the whole country was divided into more than 6 million enumeration areas. So for 1 million is about a little bit more than 100 households. For the first time, online self-enumeration was made available in China's in the census, reduce the face-to-face contact with the census respondent, and reduce the disturb to the household. If we take a consider of the reference data is November 1, 2020, so it's in the special period is that time. So it's quite important. The typical process of self-enumeration is likely this. The residents scan the QR code provided by the census enumerator through the WeChat. WeChat is like the Facebook software. Then the household, they can log in to a unique interface of the specific household and fill in the information. In the end, more than 30 million households across the country completed the self-enumeration, only counting for 6% for the whole country. Another important innovation in the census enumeration process is the use of electricity big data to assist in determining whether a residence is vacant. So the enumerator can use the mobile phones just to find a code on the electricity meters, and then will tell you whether the household used the electricity in the past 1 month, how many days, and how the electricity, the quantities. Nowadays, China's domestic migration is very active. According to our census results, China's migrant population reached nearly 400 million in 2022, accounting for about 27% of the total populations. So it's quite possible for enumerators cannot find the household in his first visitors. So this one can help our enumerator to quite identify survey household or residents whether it is vacant. So the state grid is a company of provide the electricities. They add a Census module to the online state grid app and use the electricity data of smart meter to assist in identifying vacant residents according to the electricity usage. Data closing checking and verification is a brand new element in the 2022 census, which greatly improves the quality of census data. The data verification is mainly consists of two parts. One is to compare with the administrative records coming from the Department of Public Security, Public Health, and the Civil Affairs. The second is to use the positional big data of the mobile phone operators, assessing the population distribution across the areas and the status of the population flow to assist the determine the distribution of migrant populations. Internet cloud technologies and cloud service and cloud applications are innovation of the 2022 census, based on the infrastructure construction. Using cloud technologies, we developed a data processing environment in centralized manner across the country, and the short-form data was collected, reported, and pulled into the national data set within only 15 days, and realized the processing and the aggregation of massive data, and realized the online centralized management of over 7 million census enumerators and supervisors for the real-time monitoring of the field work progress. Next, I will share some prospects of the next census. The first is to further promote the self-enumerations. Besides the census, we have the annual service and the coming 2025 census. We will continue to promote the self-enumerator in the survey and strive to further increase the rate of self-enumerator in the future census. The second is to deepen the use of the administrative records. There are a lot of records scattered in the different departments and agencies, but they are not connected with each other. After the census, we still use a lot of data to try to combine them to help the annual population estimation. And at just 1 month ago, there's a new agency at the national levels was established. We call it the National Bureau of the Data. So we will we seek for the close cooperation with the new bureau to expand the application of the administrative records in the population statistics. The last is to improve the use of mobile phone big data. Now we try to estimate the population at the month level, monthly, and for the sub areas, small areas. We not just before the 2022, we only provide the national level and the provincial level data at annual base, but now we try to provide the estimates for on county levels. So I think all the experience in use the administrative records can help the 23rd round of the census. Of course, we should also keep in mind the current technology development is rapidly, with change every day, and new technology and the methods are likely to emerge in the next 7 years. We will keep observing the new technologies and the methods to continually improve the efficiency and the quality of the census. I wish maybe there's no census in the traditional mean in the next round. If we combine all the administrative records together and to improve the quality and to enlarge the coverage of the records, no, maybe we just use the administrative records to give a very good base for the census. This is the end of my presentation, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Director General Wang, and thank you, I think, for sharing. As you saw, many big data innovations in the 2020 Census for China. So you'll be able to ask some questions of DG Wang, but also maybe to self-publicize, but NBS along with UNFPA and UNICEF have worked together to actually document the innovations in the 2020 census, and I believe there are copies of that publication on the side table. So if you would like to read more about that, please do pick them up on the way out. So now we're going to move to the Indonesian experience, and we have Mr. Imam Majdi with us, who is the Deputy Chief Statistician for BPS Statistics Indonesia. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation to come to Hangzhou, and I'm very honored to stand up in front of you. I would like to share our experience in conducting 2020 population census by using the administrative data, and also I would like to address some important things. What's the next plan to conduct the register-based population census in 2030? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, our last 2020 population census was conducted during COVID-19 pandemic situations, and many restrictions we know that were imposed to society, such as restrictions on the mobility, physical distancing, and also many other social activities. The government also set policy to reallocate the government budget for handling COVID-19 cases, focusing on health and safety for the people. So that's why the budgets for conducting the 2020 population census was reduced significantly. we had been planning to utilize the administrative population data, which is owned by the Ministry of Home Affairs. However, we're facing some difficulties. There are some issues on the population data. First of all, the data did not always reflect the real situations because it cannot capture the people's mobility, for example. People that have new address, or even people like having multiple residents. So some people like homeless and nomadic people were not registered yet. And the second issue that there are some concepts that should be harmonized between the statistical concept and also administrative. So this is also become one issue that we have to solve. There is also a problem with the limited access to the database because we need some regulations in order to get the access to the population data. So that was the obstacles that we have to face at the beginning. And the next slide, please. So according to the situations and the issues that I explained before, we decided to conduct the 2020 population census by changing our main strategy. Basically that we use the combined method. We try to use best optimal the administrative population data in combination with the conventional method of field enumerations. And we realized that there is some consequences that we have to make adjustment on the methodology. The first one, that we need to redesign our questionnaires by reducing some variables. For example, like we reduce the individual characteristic variables, and also we remove completely about the housing characteristics because we need shorten time to have the interview with the people. And secondly, that business process was also redesigned in order to minimize face-to-face interactions by adopting self-enumerations techniques and methods. And also we used the drop-off and pick-up questionnaire mechanism. And of course, we extensively use the IT innovation, especially in data collections and processing. And as the communication strategy, we need to, put more engagement to the public because at that time, more news about the COVID-19 rather than about the population census itself. And the next slide. Yeah, so we use all possible means of paper and digital assisted interviewing methods for data collection, especially during the conduction of 2020 population census. It was divided into two phases, basically. The first phase, we were talking about the self-enumerations. It was conducted on 15 February to 29 May 2020 by using the web interviewing tools, or KEWI. These tools was linked to administrative population database directly so that people's information can be validated online. And the result was surprisingly good, that about 51.36 million people participated in this online census. So it's about 19.1% of the total populations. And in the second phase, about the field enumerations, it was conducted in September 2020 in 1 month. We basically divided all Indonesian regions into 3 zones. The first zone is meant to perform self-enumeration by using the drop-off and pick-up questionnaires method. And we got responses from about 64.29 million people. So the green color, it represents what we call DOPU method. And the second method, in the yellow one, basically we use the all registered administrative population data to verify to the people directly. We're using the KP, like tablets and also mobile phone, to verify more than 202 million people. And zone 3, basically, it is about the paper-based interview. It was conducted in the eastern part of Indonesia in the pink color. The eastern part, especially, we encounter some difficulties in terms of the geography and also the IT infrastructure. So that's why we use the paper-based interview in this case. Next slide. Since there are some restrictions on the people's mobility and physical distancing, we fully utilize the e-learning mechanism to train more than 200,000 field enumerators. And also we use the social media for them to communicate, to self-learning. This is very intensively, they use IT mechanism. And also we use this strategy also to inform, to announce, and also to socialize the event of 2020 population census to the publics in order to get their strong engagements. And it is quite hard actually when we socialize the event of the 2020 population census, since people are more concerned about the COVID-19. However, with the help with all parties, all government levels, and all the village chiefs, so we could conduct the population census 2020 successfully. And the last slides, we are going to talk about how we aim the census 2030 rounds. We try to usefully register-based data. In this case, that BPS, Statistics Indonesia, in collaboration with the Ministry of Home Affairs, we set up a roadmap that as shown in the slides. So there are some key activities that we are doing. The first one, we are currently harmonizing about the methodology, how the statistical concept and administrative concept should be harmonized. For example, right now we are constructing our statistical frames based on the concept of family as the statistical units, and also using the administrative local area for the demarcacy of the enumeration. And updating the register-based information is really crucial. So currently the government of Indonesia, along with the BPS Statistics Indonesia, has initiated what we call socio-economic registration. This is used for policy intervention to poverty eradication and also to empower the micro and small-scale economic. In this case, the socio-economic information will be integrated with the administrative population data so that it will be updated regularly. In terms of the de facto mechanism, we can use the socio-economic registrations to update all this condition of the people. So that's why that in 2030, we will use both the administrative population data as well as the socio-economic registration data. Another important thing is related to the legal basis. We are proposing right now the revision of our Statistics Act. It is important that the new legislation will cover exclusive rights to access the administrative data as well as the private data and personal data. When we talk about the big data, so access is the most crucial thing by the statistics. So we are going to use this kind of data for the purpose of statistics. And finally, that administrative data will reach its maturity eventually in terms of the accuracy and the representativeness. We do hope that administrative data can be used effectively for policy formulation as well as for the population statistics development. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Majdi. And I think thank you for sharing that experience, really looking at how you had to quickly integrate innovations into the census experience in Indonesia in response to challenges of COVID-19, and not least of all, a sizable budget reduction as well. And I think it's interesting to see how you adopted different methodologies for different geographical zones as well. So very interesting, thank you. Now I'm hoping that we will be shared by an online speaker. We should hopefully be joined by David Thorogood, who is the team leader for population and housing census at Eurostat. Do we have David online? Ah, David, good morning. Can you hear me? We can see you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And maybe, are you going to use slides?
I will, yes. So,
Yes, okay. I'll let you know if we can see them. Please go ahead.
Okay, I hope you can see the slides as well.
Not at the moment, no.
Not yet. Right, one moment. Ah, yes.
Okay, yes. We can hear you and we can see your slides. Please go ahead.
That's a good start, isn't it? Okay, thank you, and hello everybody. Greetings from Luxembourg. My name is David Thorogood, and I'm responsible for Eurostat's work coordinating the population and housing censuses in the European Union. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to talk a little bit about how the census in the European Union is changing and how we're addressing some of the opportunities and challenges which stem from those changes. Yeah. I'm having difficulties changing. So. Maybe.
Sorry, just to ask the tech team, could you help David
yeah,
move his
the
slides?
problem's changing slides there.
Sorry, we're just asking the technical team if they can help you.
Ah, that seems to be working. Thank you. Thank you. So what I'd like...
Sorry, David, now we can't see your slides. now we can only see you.
Okay.
Could I suggest, hang on. Right, now the slides are back and you're on overview. Yes.
Okay,
now
thank
it
you.
Should hopefully work.
Yeah, so what I'd like to do is say a little bit about the way, the role of Eurostat and our way of working, which does have a particular impact on the organization of this work. To say something about the 2021 program, which is currently ongoing, but really to talk about the large changes that we're seeing in data sources and methods for population statistics. And this is something which we're seeing across Europe, and really talking a little bit about how the population statistics are developing across Europe and how we're aiming to take advantage of what these new developments will allow us. Again, it's possible to change my slide. No, it appears that
yeah, sorry, David. We're just asking the tech team. I wonder if for the sake of time, maybe you could continue
just
presenting and then we hope the
slides,
we can catch the
I
slides
think it may be better, yes. Thank you very much. Just first of all, the context to understand the role of Eurostat. Eurostat is part of the European Commission and it is the statistical office for the European Union. The key thing to understand is that Eurostat does not in itself collect data. We don't work with the primary data collections because this is very much the responsibility of the national statistical authorities. What instead happens is that Eurostat consolidates data and ensures that they are comparable and using a harmonized methodology to produce harmonized outputs. And so this actually has an impact on how we organize our work on population statistics generally and the census specifically. And so we work with the national statistical authorities to try to provide what we call a common statistical language, which embraces both the concepts, methods, structures, and technical standards for our work. And a lot of the data which are supplied to Eurostat are they're supplied under a legal obligation. So there are European laws which specify the data which need to be supplied to Eurostat. For 2021, the census program was based on our earlier 2011 program, And 2011 in itself represented a very large increase in the census coordination work for Eurostat. It was really a growth area for us in 2011. But based on 2011, we've worked to try to learn what has worked and what was most useful for users from the 2011 program. The data which are collected by the national statistical authorities under the EU census program. They relate, of course, to families, persons, households, and dwellings, and they have to be produced to meet concepts and definitions which are specified under European statistical law. The data are organized in the form of 41 very detailed multi-dimensional tables. And these data, which represent several 100 million cells down to the level of individual municipalities, because of the size of the data sets, these are maintained on the national databases and can be accessed online. The main dissemination of the European Census Programme is through predefined tables available online, but also via the Census Hub, which is an interface which allows users to define customized tables and actually have access to these within a few seconds, and actually to download data which are specific to their needs. Probably the biggest development for 2021 was the dissemination of data for a standard 1 kilometer grid. And this is a new development at a European level. It's something which was happening at national level in a number of countries, but is now taking place for a standard grid across Europe, allowing analysis such as which are not possible when we use predefined output areas. For example, we will be able to work out the number of people living in areas which are at risk of floods, or those which live at a certain distance from transport facilities or from particular types of hospital, for example. So these are some of the developments which we have for 2021. There was one slide which I was particularly keen to show, but maybe that's not possible, which actually addresses how data are produced. As I said, the responsibility for producing census data at a primary level rests with the national statistical institutes. But what we have seen is a very strong evolution of the types of census data collection at European level. We have gone from a situation where the majority, or in 2011, where a small majority of European Union member states were using what might be termed traditional census methods, with either door-to-door or computer-assisted individual enumeration, and a move now in 2021 where almost half of member states are using purely administrative sources, and a significant number as well are using a combined census methodology, combining administrative sources and more traditional data collections. And what we're seeing for the future as predicted, and what is very likely to happen, and I think has been accelerated by the impact of the COVID pandemic, is a move actually away, not just from traditional census methods, but also a move away from the combined census methods, with I think in the near future, the majority of EU member states using purely administrative data sources to produce census type statistics. And in this case, they're using not just population registers, but also combining data from health, social security, tax, and education administrative sources to bring this together. What we are doing at the moment, looking forward, is to try to develop a program for a redevelopment of European population statistics. And this has involved an extensive consultation with both the national data producers and different groups of data users, and with the aim of producing a new legal framework for population statistics at European level. And this aims to exploit changing methods and the increased use of administrative sources, and also to look at the possibilities of the sharing of data between national authorities at a statistical level between different member states of the European Union. And the aim is to have a framework for a long-term evolution of these statistics, not just for 1 decade ahead, but something which can provide a framework for these data to change and to evolve as we move forward. In our consultation, the types of user needs which emerged, there's a need from many users for more frequent data, for data not just to be available in detail every 10 years, but to have data available even down, in certain cases, to have data available on a quarterly basis, and certainly to have a lot more data on an annual basis. There's also a need for these data to be made available much sooner after the reference date. And that is something where where both of these areas, both for more frequent data and faster data, it's something which we believe that the use of administrative sources can make feasible. And this is a key area of work. There's also a need for more and more frequent geographically detailed data to include more data available at a 1 kilometer grid level, and also for an improved delineation between urban and rural areas, again, which is possible using very detailed geo-referenced data. There is also, as well, a need to really improve and maintain the harmonization of the different core concepts which we have, both whilst we will remain the use of different data sources at national level. There is a need for increased harmonization to ensure that the data are as harmonized and comparable as possible when we're looking at data between different countries. And one of the key themes which emerged was the need for improved data on certain key topics. And one of these was that relating to migration and also to different migrant populations. There's a number of policy areas which have a very strong interest in that information. In terms of the challenges and opportunities, I've mentioned that the responsibility for producing these data rests with the national statistical authorities. So we work on a basis of harmonizing the outputs rather than harmonizing the statistical inputs in terms of methods and data sources. And so these differences will continue. So whatever framework we develop must be appropriate to the national differences which exist. As I've said, there is a widespread but not quite universal move to the use of administrative data sources, which again we believe will make it possible to produce data faster and more frequently, and hopefully more economically as well. One key issue, though, retains that of maybe the core concept of population statistics, which is that of who we are counting. We would like to retain the international concept of usual residence based on a 12-month duration of residence. But this can be less straightforward to apply when using administrative sources. And so there, again, we are looking at increased use of science of life methods and rates of stay to help adapt administrative data to more closely comply with concepts based on a place of actual residence. There are also issues related to this for related concepts such as family and household composition, which again can be challenging to adapt and prepare when we are using administrative sources. Just to end, just in terms of the future steps, there is the proposal for this new legal framework for European population statistics has been prepared by Eurostat, but it does not become does not have a legal status until it has been discussed and voted upon by the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union. And this process is happening now. It's not clear how long this will take, but we hope that this could be finished by the end of this year, or possibly moving into next year. Within this framework, though, we also need to develop ways to put this framework into operation, and so there will be detailed implementing legislation and also implementing guidelines on how the framework should actually be applied, taking into account the national differences and possibilities in producing population statistics. What we also will do is to continue with the dissemination of the 2021 census. This will include a large number of both customizable and fixed online tables, as well as written publications, and of course the geo-referenced grid data, which I mentioned earlier. All of this information, for further information, I would suggest looking at the Eurostat website. There are detailed pages which address population and demographic statistics, where you can find both the results of previous censuses and also information about our work for the future development of population statistics. Overall, the aim is to integrate the census, the decennial census, as part of an overall system of population statistics, which will be produced to different levels of detail, and also on different timeframes according to user needs. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry I was not able to fully show you the slides for this presentation.
Thanks, David. Thanks so much for sharing the Europe's experience of sort of the evolving census, and I'm sorry we had those technological problems. Okay, so with an eye on time, I think we maybe have time to take 3 or 4 quick questions from the floor for our speakers today. I wonder if I could ask our 3 speakers just to come and sit on the panel. And oh, did we lose David? I think we've lost him. That's a shame. Anyway, so DG Wang as well. And do we have someone with a mic that can run around for me? Okay, well, while we're waiting for that, I will run with the mic. So.
Thank you very much. This is Himraj from National Statistics Office of Nepal. We also recently completed the population census in 2021 and then just released the final estimates last month. Particularly, I have a question to the panelists on the coverage issue. I imagine in a small country like Nepal, we faced a lot of under-enumeration as well as over-enumeration in some places. I can imagine the 7 million enumerators that have been used in China, that DG was referring, and then the use of technology like in so many islands in Indonesia, how to minimize that coverage error, particularly on the under-enumeration in those remote areas, and then maybe the over-enumeration caused due to the definition. For example, we adopted the definition of usual place of residence. And then even one family member is living in the town and another family member living in the villages, may be reporting from both places. No, they don't want to leave their family members with another name. Though Francesca highlighted a little bit about the use of the technology, to minimize those coverage errors. Particularly, I am interested to know from the experience of China and Indonesia, what you have done to minimize those coverage errors. Thank you very much.
I'll take a couple more maybe. Anyway, thank you, sir. Any more questions from the floor? Okay, I know, but that's my colleague, I feel. I was going to go to someone else, but
I mean, I heard that many countries are working towards a register-based census. But I'm just wondering whether we have like a global sort of practice of when everyone is talking about the register-based census, do we have a common understanding of like an ideal modality? Or, I mean, what are the key factors of defining a register-based census, or are there some variations? So this is also a part of, we can also call it a register-based census. reason because in China, UNFPA, as my boss was saying, that we are working with NBS, moving in that direction. So we want to understand what are the key factors of being part of that. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much. Any final question? No, okay, so I'll go to the panel. Maybe, I don't know who would like to respond on the issue of coverage from our statistical colleague from Nepal. Director General Wang, do you want to talk about coverage, or from Indonesia? Want to talk about coverage? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Imran, for your question. Yeah, in terms of the quality, there are two parts. One is the coverage, and one is about the contents of the quality. So in terms of the coverage, at least when we have a plan to do the census, we need to prepare the digital map for each enumerator, for each regions, for each area. So make sure that all buildings already outlined on the maps, and based on this, the enumerator will go through one by one for each building. However, that in the field operations, we should have a mechanism or field operation management that every enumerator should be supervised by other supervisors. And we have 3 levels, direct supervisors and also indirect supervisors. So those should report all the progress to our online systems. So through the dashboard that we can see whether each area already covered by each enumerator transparently, so that if there is some missing action during the time, so we can do some, proposed action to the enumerator to ask them to finish up all those coverage. I think that's all.
Thank you. Madam Wang, would you like to comment on coverage? And then I'll come to Francesca to finish us off just with Zhao's question about registration base.
其实那个 ，Thank you very much 刚才那个尼泊尔的这先生是吧？他是问到了一个中国人口普查的一个非常重要的问题，因为中国人口是从农村向城镇流动非常大，所以呢，他这个有不少人在两边都登记为常住人口。
Yes, so our colleagues from Nepal National Statistics Office asked a question that is very common in China. So in China, we have like very high mobility of the people flowing from rural area to the cities and the towns, and there are sometimes the coverage issues appears that they register 2 times as the juror, like the regular residents, both areas.
那么我们是差不多有1/10的人口被在2个地方都登记为常住人口，但是他们都有身份证。
So there's around 10% of the population of a country in China is actually registered like 2 times as the juror population.
但是呢，非常幸运的是，他们这些流动人口基本上都有手机，所以最后我们用手机的。 它大数据的这个位置信息来判断它究竟是哪里的常住人口。
And fortunately, almost every person have a cell phone, and then we integrate on the census with the big data, cell phone big data as they're presented, and then we can like try to fix the duplication issues and know where exactly the person located.
那么在根据这个大数据位置这个手机位置信息的这个判断。 超过80%的人口，大家都是在城市，他那个居住的地方是常住人口。
So based on the big data using cell phone, the statistics shows around 80% of the population actually live in city and towns.
所以这个大数据对于改善中国人口普查的这个登记质量产生了很大的作用。
Therefore, the big data and the data revolution is extremely helpful to improve the accuracy of census and the population statistics.
Thank you, Madam Wang. Yes, just to Francesca to finish us off.
Thank you, Justine. So quickly, because I don't want to stand between this meeting and your lunch. So thank you for the question on moving towards register-based approaches. So I checked back my slide, and in fact, if we just focus on the proportion of countries that are only relying on fully register-based approaches, that didn't change much between this current round, so this decade of censuses, the 2020, and the previous one. So we are looking at around 10% of countries. So think of around maybe 15, 19 countries in the world. But what has really changed significantly is the number of countries, or the proportion of countries that have moved towards a combined census methodology. So what we see in terms of trends and new developments is that more and more countries are moving towards looking at administrative records to get new additional sources of information, so to complement what they get from the traditional census taking, and also, I think very importantly, to have an additional source to validate the data they collect from the traditional methods, so to triangulate and really assess the goodness and the quality of the census, the data collected. My wish, or going back to what our colleague from China mentioned, I don't think that the 2030 round will be the round where we see all countries switching or moving to a fully register-based census. But I think that the next round, the 2040 round, will be the one. So I hope that's a good forecast on my side, but I think that's what countries are really telling us, that that's their goal and their aim. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So that brings us to an end. Thank you so much for joining us. Can we show our appreciation for all of our speakers today? And I'd like to think that as we're going to be together here for the next 2 to 3 days, let's keep the conversations on census going. Please do pick up our publication on China census innovation on the way out, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you all very much.